All right, and we are live. Hello, world. It is Jack Heald, the dad you wish you had. It is Friday, February what's today, the 7th? Friday, February 7th, 2020. And today is Book Review Friday. We're going to be talking, hopefully every Friday, about books that matter, books that any man should have in his library, or at least should have absorbed in his lifetime. But first, as we do at the start of every single one of these afternoon updates, we must drink a toast to this present moment. Today's toast, water. It's good to be alive. I am doing this particular broadcast extemporaneously. I sat down and tried to write my thoughts about this book multiple times, and I finally just realized I have so many thoughts about it that I'm just going to have to go. So today's book, The True Believer by Eric Hoffer, I will link it, and I hope we don't have mirror imaging on. Sorry about that. I will link it in the show notes so you can get it yourself. The book was written in 1951, 6 years after the end of World War II. It is a study of the psychology of mass movements. Why does it apply today? Well, the psychology behind mass movements, behind what makes a person join a mass movement, was very important to Eric Hoffer in 1951 because he was dealing with the aftermath of World War II. World War II was dominated primarily by Nazism, by a severe form of nationalism out of the Japanese Empire, by fascism out of Italy, and in addition, there was a tremendous religious mass movement that was going on in the United States at the same time. In addition to that, we were still dealing with, 30 years into the communist experiment in Soviet Russia at that point, and Chiang Kai-shek was being run out of mainland China by Mao Zedong, with another communist mass movement in China. So the psychology of mass movements was very, very important to Hoffer at that time. Why does it matter today? Well, because the psychology that we see driving people into mass movements, giving up everything that matters in a normal person's life in order to promote and give themselves to the goals of this mass movement, we see them extant in the world today. Specifically, I'm talking about the social justice movement. And you know what I'm talking about, the wildly regressive left that assumes that anyone who doesn't believe what they believe about the world is a racist, homophobe, Islamophobe. You know all the terms. Hoffer, 70 years ago, wrote a book that addresses specifically what's going on. I cannot recommend it too highly, but I am going to highlight a couple of things that really jumped out at me. I first read this book about 30 years ago. Some of you know the story. My two best friends in the world joined a cult. I was 29 years old at the time, and these guys were my brothers in every sense of the word. They were my chosen family, the two men closest to me in my whole life. When they joined the cult, they literally disappeared from my life. It was as if they had been kidnapped off the face of the earth. Now, I was in a small town in Texas. It was hard to disappear, but they did. I had to understand what had happened to two men that I thought were pretty level-headed guys. Why did they allow themselves and their entire families to be sucked into the gaping maw of this cult? And the first thing that I read that gave me any kind of insight into what had happened was Eric Hoffer's The True Believer. First insight that came from that book: people who are prone to being pulled into mass movements are the very best candidates for a different mass movement. Let me repeat that in a different language. Somebody who used to be a Nazi was a great candidate to become a communist. Two mass movements that ostensibly had polar opposite aims. Somebody who had been an ardent nationalist was a great candidate to become a communist. In other words, the content of these mass movements their arguments, their goals are irrelevant to the members of the mass movement. What matters is the energy of the mass movement. What matters is the context of the mass movement. The content is irrelevant. It is the context. The next thing that I want to point out that I just got from Hoffer during my rereading here, and the reason it stuck out to me, I think, is going to become obvious. He points out that people who give themselves to mass movements, the most passionate, the most fanatical about a mass movement, are generally people who have rejected themselves, who take a look at themselves, judge their own lives as unworthy, as unsuccessful, as a failure, and are psychologically driven to literally divest themselves of themselves. They want to lose themselves into this mass, this giant movement, and it gives their otherwise meaningless lives a sense of meaning and direction. And we see that today very, very clearly with the mass movement that is the crazed, insane, regressive left. These are people, by and large, who are losers in life. They have failed to make of their lives anything useful and valuable. And so, rather than buckle down and stop doing the stupid things they've been doing and get their lives together, they're sucked into the magnetism, the vacuum of this mass movement, and it gives their lives meaning without actually having to make any change to their lives. They literally give over their entire volition and their energy to the movement and the direction of the mass movement. The book is The True Believer by Eric Hoffer. Get it, absorb it. I would love to hear your comments. I'm Jack Heel, the dad you wish you had. Don't forget to subscribe and comment. Look forward to hearing from you. We'll talk next week.